I sat on the cold wooden bench outside the courtroom, gripping the edge so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I used to believe that after everything I had been through, nothing could surprise me anymore. But sitting here, waiting for the verdict, I realized I had been wrong. The courtroom doors creaked open, and my lawyer, Tessa, stepped out, her expression carefully neutral. That wasn't a good sign. I straightened my back, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Well?" Tessa sighed, running a hand through her sleek blonde hair. "It's not what we wanted." I didn't need to hear anything else. The walls of the courthouse seemed to close in around me. No. He won partial ownership," Tessa continued in a hushed voice. "The judge ruled that because the house was technically acquired during the marriage, Ethan has the right to access it, even though you were the one who paid for it and renovated it. He doesn't own it outright, but he has visitation rights, every other weekend, plus alternating holidays." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Visitation rights? Like it's a damn child? Tessa gave me a look that was part sympathy, part exhaustion. That's how the court sees it. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to process this. This house wasn't just a house to me. It was my safe haven, my sanctuary, the place I had poured my heart, soul, and every damn penny into while Ethan had been off spending his time, and my money, on a new life with his mistress. And now, after all the lies, the betrayals, the humiliation, he still had a foot in my life. "He's already rubbing it in," Tessa added, lowering her voice. "I overheard him telling his lawyer that he's bringing his new family there next weekend." My stomach turned. "You mean that homewrecker Rebecca and her daughter?" "Yes." I gritted my teeth. That house wasn't some weekend getaway for Ethan's picture-perfect new family. It was mine. Tessa touched my arm. "Look, I know this isn't fair, but don't let him see you break. We'll appeal." I nodded stiffly, but deep down, I knew how the system worked. It could take years to undo this, and in the meantime, Ethan would have full access to the house I had built from the ground up. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what I was capable of. That night I sat in my dimly lit kitchen, staring at an untouched glass of wine while Tessa sat across from me, flipping through case files. "We can drag this out in court," she said, tapping a pen against her notepad. "But that means more legal fees, more time, and more stress." I barely heard her. My mind was elsewhere, racing through every possibility. There has to be a way to make the house unusable for him. Tessa smirked. "We could always go full petty. I know a woman who turned her ex's summer home into an animal shelter." I let out a hollow laugh. "Tempting, but I need something that ensures he can't just waltz in and make himself comfortable." Tessa leaned back, considering me carefully. "What if," she said slowly, "he gets more than he bargained for?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She pulled out some documents and slid them across the table. "I did some digging after the trial. The court order only specifies access rights to the house itself, not the financial obligations tied to it." I picked up the papers, scanning them. Then it hit me. A mortgage. Tessa's grin widened as she saw the realization dawn on my face. "Exactly. If I took out a hefty mortgage against the house, one Ethan would automatically inherit partial responsibility for. He wouldn't be walking into some free vacation home. He'd be walking into a financial trap." "You're brilliant," I whispered. She shrugged. "I'm just good at playing dirty when the situation calls for it." I grabbed my laptop, my mind buzzing with energy for the first time in weeks. "How much do you think I could get?" "Easily 60 grand, she said. "Maybe more." I hesitated. "Wouldn't that put me in a financial hole?" Tessa smirked. "Only temporarily. You'll refinance once we get him to back off. The goal isn't to bankrupt you. It's to make him realize the house isn't worth it." I took a deep breath. It was risky, but considering the alternative, watching Ethan and his mistress sip wine on my deck while pretending to be the perfect couple, yeah, this was worth it. A week later, the paperwork was filed, the mortgage approved, and the trap was set. Ethan had no idea what was waiting for him when he smugly texted me, "Just letting you know we'll be using the house this weekend." Don't worry, I'll make sure everything stays in one piece. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a deep breath and responded, "No problem. Hope you enjoy your stay." Because soon enough, he wouldn't. I had spent years dealing with Ethan's arrogance, his need to win at all costs, his complete disregard for anyone but himself. But what he failed to understand was that I wasn't the same woman he had walked away from. I wasn't the naive, trusting wife who had once thought love meant sacrifice. No, I was done sacrificing for him. And now, I was just waiting for the moment he realized it. I didn't bother going to the house that Friday when Ethan and Rebecca arrived. I didn't need to. Instead, I let him walk right into the mess he had made. The first call came around 7 p.m. "Lana," Ethan's voice was tight, controlled, like he was trying really hard to keep his temper in check. "What the hell is this?" I smiled, swirling my wine glass. "You'll have to be more specific." "The bank," he snapped. "I got an email saying there's a $60,000 mortgage tied to the house." "Oh," I feigned innocence. "Yeah, I had to take one out. Maintenance, upgrades, property taxes. Life is expensive." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could practically hear his brain working, trying to figure out how this affected him. Finally, he said, "That's your debt, not mine." I let out a soft chuckle. "You should check again, Ethan. Since you fought so hard for partial ownership, the bank sees you as a co-owner, which means that mortgage, it's yours too." His breath came out sharp. "You can't do this." "I can actually. It's completely legal. You wanted the house, so now you have it. Congratulations, co-owner." I hung up before he could respond. By Saturday morning, Ethan had obviously been on the phone with his lawyer because I woke up to another text from him. "We need to talk. This is ridiculous." I ignored it. By Saturday afternoon, I got another, "Lana, you've made your point. Let's work something out." I ignored that one too. Then, by Saturday night, I got a text from Rebecca. "This is unfair to Ethan. He's trying to do the right thing. Stop making things difficult." That one made me laugh. Rebecca, of all people, telling me to stop making things difficult? After she waltzed into my marriage and helped herself to my life? I replied with exactly one emoji. And then, finally, came Sunday night. Ethan showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't answer the door, but curiosity got the best of me. I swung it open, arms crossed. Bold move. He looked terrible. His usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by stress lines and exhaustion. "Lana, this isn't funny." I leaned against the doorframe. "I think it's hilarious." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I can't afford this." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were living your best life with Rebecca." "This mortgage is $200 a month," he continued, ignoring my jab. "On top of my rent, my car, I held up a hand. "You should have thought about that before you insisted on keeping the house. That's what happens when you get greedy." He exhaled sharply, his hands gripping his hips. "What do you want?" Oh, now he was bargaining. I tilted my head. "What do you think I want, Ethan?" He clenched his jaw. "You want me to give up my rights to the house?" I shrugged. I wouldn't say no." He laughed bitterly. "You're insane." "No," I said, my voice even. "I'm just done playing nice." For a moment, he just stood there, as if he was trying to calculate his next move. Then, finally, he sighed, rubbing his temple. "If I sign over the house, you'll take my name off the mortgage?" I pretended to think about it. Maybe." "Lana." I rolled my eyes. "Yes, Ethan. You sign it over, and I refinance in my name alone. You're free." His jaw tightened. "I'll talk to my lawyer." I grinned. "You do that." As he turned to leave, I called out, "Oh, and Ethan?" He stopped, shoulders tense. "Next time you try to steal something from me, make sure you can afford it." By the following Friday, Ethan's lawyer reached out to Tessa. The conversation was short and humiliating. For Ethan, he wanted out, and I was going to let him crawl his way there. By the time we met at the courthouse to finalize the transfer, he wouldn't even look at me. His signature was sloppy, his knuckles white as he clenched the pen. Good luck with the house, he muttered as he shoved the paperwork toward me. I smiled sweetly. Oh, don't worry. I always make smart investments. The judge reviewed everything, nodding in approval. Looks like that's settled. The house is yours, Miss Carter. Mr. Vaughn is officially removed from ownership and any financial responsibility. Ethan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. We're done? Yes, the judge confirmed. You're free to go. Ethan didn't even say goodbye. He just stormed out, his shoulders hunched in defeat. As I walked out of the courthouse, papers in hand, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Ethan had thought he could take everything from me. My home, my stability, my dignity. But in the end, all he got was a pile of debt and a lesson in consequences. And me, I got my house, I got my freedom, and most importantly, I got to watch him lose. Ethan might have walked out of that courthouse thinking he was done with me, but his problems were just beginning. Because while he had spent the last year scheming to take my home, I had spent that same time learning how to play the game better than him. And now, it was time for the final round. I expected Ethan to go completely silent after the courthouse signing, but instead, I got one last text from him that evening. Congrats. Hope it was worth it. I stared at my phone, debating whether to reply. Did I feel bad? No. But was I curious about just how much this loss was affecting him? Absolutely. So I texted back, every penny. He didn't reply. A week later, I got a call from Tessa, my lawyer and my closest confidant throughout this whole mess. You're not going to believe this, she said, barely able to contain her laughter. Try me. She cleared her throat. Ethan just filed a motion to undo the house transfer. I nearly choked on my coffee. He what? He's claiming he was forced to sign it under financial duress. I burst out laughing. He fought tooth and nail to get that house, only to give it up and now want it back? Yep, she confirmed. And the best part? He's completely broke. I sat up straighter. How broke? He defaulted on 2 credit cards, missed a rent payment, and, get this, Rebecca kicked him out. Oh, this was too good. So now, I mused, he wants the house back because it's his only option left. Exactly, I grinned. What's the likelihood of him winning? 0, Tessa said. But if you want a front row seat to his humiliation, you might want to come to the hearing. Like I would miss that. The day of the hearing, I walked into the courthouse feeling lighter than air. Ethan, on the other hand, he looked like hell. His usually well-groomed hair was messy, his expensive suits replaced by a cheap, ill-fitted blazer, and he had the look of a man who hadn't slept in weeks. And when his lawyer started arguing his case, it was pathetic. Your Honor, my client was pressured into signing over his rights to the house due to a significant financial burden placed upon him by Mizzy Carter. The mortgage was not disclosed in good faith, and my client did not have time to seek legal counsel before making a decision. The judge looked unimpressed. Mr. Vaughn, were you held at gunpoint when you signed these documents? Ethan's jaw ticked. No, Your Honor. Did Ms. Carter deceive you in any way, or was the mortgage information legally documented and available to you prior to signing? Ethan hesitated. It was documented, but... The judge cut him off. Then I see no basis for your claim. Your financial hardship is not Mizzy Carter's responsibility. The transfer remains final. I barely contained my smirk as Ethan's lawyer sat down, defeated. Ethan's face was stone cold, his hands clenched into fists. He lost. Again. But he wasn't done humiliating himself. After the hearing, I was gathering my things when I heard his voice behind me. Lana. I turned, raising an eyebrow. Yes, Ethan. His arrogance was gone. The usual condescending smirk? Nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked desperate. I need the house back. I blinked. You need it? His jaw tightened. I don't have anywhere else to go. I crossed my arms. That sounds like a you problem. He let out a frustrated breath. Come on, Lana, you don't even need it. You have your own place. I tilted my head. Oh, so now you care about what I need? His nostrils flared. I made a mistake, all right? I stared at him. taking in everything. The way his shoulders sagged, the way he couldn't meet my eyes for long, the way he was finally feeling the weight of his own choices. And for the first time, I realized something. Ethan never expected to lose. He thought he would take the house, take his victory, and walk away unscathed. But now, he was begging. I sighed dramatically. "All right, Ethan." He perked up. "Yeah? I'll let you stay in the house." His eyes lit up. "For real?" I smirked. "For $3,000 a month in rent." His face fell. "Are you joking?" I pulled out my phone, pretending to type. "I can draft up a rental agreement right now if you'd like." "Lana," he growled. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. "Then I guess we're done here." His fists clenched, his eyes dark with anger. "You think you won?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I didn't think I won, Ethan." I smiled. "I know I did." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him with nothing. Ethan left that courtroom with nothing but regret and humiliation, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Because some people, they don't learn, and Ethan Vaughn was one of them. A week after the hearing, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's important." I didn't respond. A minute later, another text came through. "Lana, it's Ethan, please." That made me pause. Not because I cared, God, no, but because Ethan never used the word please. Curious, I typed back, "About what?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "Meet me at the house. I'll explain." I should have ignored it. I should have blocked his number and moved on. But instead, I found myself driving to my house, not his, just to see what kind of pathetic plea he was about to throw at me next. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan was already there, leaning against his car with his arms crossed. For a second, it was almost too familiar. The way he stood, the way he waited for me like we were still tangled in each other's lives. But then he turned, and I saw it. The defeat, the exhaustion, the realization that he had truly lost. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, stepping out of my car. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I need the house back." I barked out a laugh. "We've been over this." "No, listen." He exhaled sharply. I know I screwed up." I tilted my head. "Which part? The part where you tried to steal from me, or the part where you failed?" His jaw tightened, but instead of snapping back, he did something I didn't expect. He nodded. "You're right." That caught me off guard. He continued, his voice quieter. "I should have never tried to take the house. I thought I deserved it." I folded my arms. "And now?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "Now I know that I can't afford to deserve anything." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" He let out a bitter laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. "I'm broke, Lana." I blinked. "I have nowhere to go," he admitted. "Rebecca kicked me out. My credit's trashed. My savings are gone. And now, because of that stupid mortgage you added, I can't even sell the house to make something off of it." "Ah. So that was what this was really about," I smirked. "That stupid mortgage is exactly why you signed it over to me, Ethan. Did you think I'd make it easy for you?" His expression darkened. "You planned that." "Of course I did." He let out a humorless chuckle. "You always were smarter than me." "That's the first honest thing you've said in years." He took a deep breath. "Lana, I have no right to ask, but can I rent it from you?" I tilted my head. "Let me get this straight. After everything, after trying to take it from me, you want to rent it from me?" He nodded. I stared at him for a long moment, and then I laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full-bodied, uncontrollable laugh. Ethan's face burned with embarrassment. "Lana, I held up a hand, still laughing. "Ethan, be serious. Do you even have money for rent?" His silence answered that for me. I wiped my eyes, sighing dramatically. "All right, Ethan. Here's the deal." His eyes lifted, a flicker of hope in them. "You can stay here, but the rent?" I smiled. $6,000 a month. His face fell so hard I thought he might faint. 6. What? That's the cost of the mortgage, Ethan. If you want to live here, you're going to pay off that debt. He took a step back, shaking his head. You're insane. I shrugged. It's my house. He clenched his jaw. I can't afford that. Then I guess you need to find somewhere else to stay. His hands curled into fists. You're really going to let me be homeless? You made yourself homeless, Ethan. His breathing was heavy, his frustration rolling off him in waves. Finally, he turned, storming toward his car. This isn't over, he muttered. I smiled. No, Ethan, for you it is. I thought that was the last time I'd hear from him. I really did. But then, 2 weeks later, I got another message. This time? From Rebecca. Hey, Lana, I know we don't talk, but I just wanted to say, you were right about him. I sat there staring at my phone. I typed back, what happened? She replied almost immediately. He tried to get back in my life, told me he changed, but then I found out he was stealing from our joint accounts. I exhaled. Wow. I don't know how I didn't see it before, she continued. But I see it now. I just wanted you to know. I hesitated for a moment before responding. You deserved better. I did too. She sent one final text. I hope you're happy now. And you know what? I was. Months passed. I rented out the house to a real tenant, someone who could actually afford it. And Ethan? Last I heard, he was couch surfing, trying to find his next victim. But no matter what he did, no matter how hard he tried, he could never undo what happened. He thought he could take from me and walk away victorious. Instead, he walked away with nothing. And me, I walked away with everything that mattered. Because I learned something. Some people don't change, but if you play the game smarter, you don't need them to. If I thought Ethan would give up after that, I was wrong. Desperation makes people reckless. I had moved on, renting out my house to an actual tenant, someone who paid on time and treated the place with respect, unlike Ethan ever did. But just as I was finally settling into my new life, he reappeared, dragging his mess behind him like a dog tracking mud into a clean house. I was at my new place, sipping my morning coffee, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Urgent. I sighed, already knowing who it was. I ignored it. A few minutes later, another message. Lana, please. It's important. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Let him sweat. And then, another text. I'm at the house. We need to talk now. That got my attention. I grabbed my keys and drove over. Not because I cared what he had to say, but because the last thing I needed was him causing problems for my tenant. When I pulled up, there he was, standing in the driveway, pacing. He looked worse than before. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and there was something frantic in his eyes. He was unraveling. I stepped out of my car and crossed my arms. Ethan, what the hell are you doing here? He turned to me, his face pale and tense. Lana, He hesitated, swallowing hard. I need help. I laughed. Now you need help? He clenched his jaw. Just listen. Please. I exhaled, glancing at the house. My tenant hadn't noticed the commotion yet. Good. You have 5 minutes, I said flatly. Ethan took a deep breath. I messed up. No kidding. He ignored the jab. That mortgage you took out on the house? The one that made me sign it over? I smirked. What about it? He rubbed his temples. The bank. The debt. Lana, His voice broke slightly. I can't get a loan. I can't rent anywhere decent. My credit is destroyed. I thought I could work my way back, but I can't. And now? He exhaled shakily. I have nowhere left to go. I stared at him, unblinking. So, I need you to take my name off the mortgage. I tilted my head. You want me to free you from a debt you tried to stick me with? Yes, he said, voice raw. Because if you don't, I'm screwed. I can't even get a used car loan, Lana. I have nothing. I pretended to think about it. Then I smiled. No. His expression cracked. Lana, let's be real, Ethan. If the roles were reversed, would you help me? He hesitated, just a beat too long. That was my answer. I didn't think so. I stepped back toward my car. Figure it out. But before I could leave, he blurted out, I'll go to court. I stopped, turned. Excuse me? I'll go to the judge. I'll tell them you took the house under false pretenses, that you tricked me into giving it up. I arched my brow. Oh? You mean how I tricked you into signing legal documents with a lawyer present? His face twisted with frustration. There has to be something I can do. There isn't, I said simply, because you lost, Ethan. He shook his head like he couldn't accept it. You don't understand. I have nothing left. I sighed, shaking my head. You did that to yourself. I got in my car, but as I was about to pull away, something in the rearview mirror made me pause. Ethan, on his knees, right there in the driveway. For a moment I thought I was imagining it, but no, he was actually kneeling, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Lana, he rasped, looking up at me, humiliated beyond belief. Please, don't do this to me. I stared at him through the mirror. This was it. The final moment. The man who tried to take everything from me. The man who cheated, manipulated, and treated me like a backup plan. And now, he was begging. I took my time answering. Then finally I said, You did this to yourself. And with that, I drove away. A few days later, I got a message from my lawyer. Ethan had actually gone to court, trying to challenge the mortgage. He claimed he had been forced into the agreement under emotional distress. A complete lie, of course. But here's the kicker. The judge laughed him out of the courtroom. Literally, laughed. My lawyer told me the judge even said, Mr. Vaughn, being bad with money is not a legal defense. Absolute poetry. After that, Ethan disappeared from my life completely. Rebecca blocked him. His credit tanked. His career opportunities dried up. And me? I thrived. I renovated the house even more, making it exactly how I always wanted it. And the best part? Every month, as I collected rent from my tenant, I smiled knowing that the house, my house, was still under Ethan's name in one way. On the mortgage debt, which meant that for years, Ethan would still have a financial chain around his neck, a weight he tried to force on me, only to have it wrapped around his own throat instead. He thought he could steal my future. Instead, he buried his own, and there's something kind of poetic about that. Because at the end of the day, justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about watching the universe set things right. And trust me, it did. For a long time after that courtroom embarrassment, Ethan disappeared from my life. I didn't hear from him, didn't see him, didn't even get one of his pathetic texts begging for another chance or whining about his latest financial disaster. It was almost unsettling how quickly he vanished. Almost. Because if I knew anything about Ethan, it was this. He never truly gave up. Not on something he thought he was entitled to. Not on something he once believed was his. And that house? That house was always about control. Life moved on. I flourished. My tenant loved the house, took good care of it, and paid rent on time, every single month. It felt like justice every time that money hit my account. One evening, about a year after Ethan's humiliating court loss, I was scrolling through my emails when something odd popped up. A real estate alert. I frowned, clicking the link. It was an automatic update for listings in the area, and right there, staring me in the face. Newly available rental property, lakeside views, spacious backyard, great investment opportunity. I skimmed the listing, my stomach twisting. It was my house, but it wasn't me who listed it. It was Ethan. Somehow, that idiot was trying to rent out my house. I didn't even hesitate. I picked up my phone and called Skylar. Hey, she answered. What's up? Guess what Ethan's trying to do? Oh no, she groaned. What now? I took a deep breath. He's trying to rent out my house. There was a brief silence. Then, Skylar laughed. Hard. You're joking, she wheezed. I wish. That man is so stupid, it's almost impressive. I rubbed my temples. I don't know what his plan is, but I need to shut this down before he screws over some poor renter. Skylar hummed. I have an idea. I leaned forward. I'm listening. The next morning, I had Skylar reach out to the number on the listing. She posed as an interested renter, asking all the right questions, and as expected, Ethan lied through his teeth. Yes, I own the home. The lease is totally flexible. You can move in as soon as you send a deposit. He was so desperate for quick cash that he tried to rush her into paying before she even saw the place. But Skylar played it cool, saying she wanted a walkthrough first. That's when I stepped in. I had my tenant pretend to be out of town, so the house would appear empty. Skylar set up a meeting with Ethan, and I waited inside. When his car pulled up, I watched from the living room window. He looked the same, maybe even worse. More tired, more ragged. Like a man who kept gambling and losing. He climbed out of his car and checked his reflection in the window. He straightened his shirt, smoothed his hair, like that would fix anything. Then he walked to the door. I didn't wait for him to knock. I swung it open, and the second his eyes landed on me, he went pale. Hi, Ethan, I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Giving house tours now? His mouth opened, then closed. I watched as panic spread across his face. Then, like always, he tried to lie his way out. Lana, he stammered. I was just trying to rent out a house you don't own, I finished for him. He swallowed hard. No, I cut him off, stepping forward. Shut up, Ethan. Just shut up. He flinched. Skylar, standing off to the side, was grinning like it was Christmas morning. You really thought this would work? I continued, crossing my arms. You thought you could scam someone into paying you rent on my house? Ethan's face twitched. It's not just your house. Oh, yes, it is. I pulled out my phone. Shall we call the cops? Let them know you're committing rental fraud? His whole body tensed. Lana, please. Please? I repeated, scoffing. No, you don't get to please me anymore. I took a slow step forward. First, you tried to take this house from me. Then, when that didn't work, you tried to dump a mortgage on me while keeping it in your name. Then, after you failed again, you tried to drag me into court, hoping to weasel your way back into ownership. His jaw clenched. And now? I laughed. Now you're just grifting like a common scam artist, trying to squeeze money out of strangers. He looked broken. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt nothing. He had made his choices. And this was the result. He rubbed a hand over his face. Lana, I don't know what to do. I shrugged. Not my problem. He sighed, shaking his head. I thought, I don't care what you thought. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Then finally his shoulders sagged in defeat. I'll take down the listing, he mumbled. I smirked. Damn right you will. He turned, trudging back to his car like a man with nothing left to fight for. I watched as he drove away, knowing deep down that was the last time I would ever see him. Because for the first time, Ethan finally got it. He lost. And this time, there was no coming back. A week later, the listing was gone. No more fake rental scam. No more messages. No more Ethan. I kept waiting for another scheme, another trick, another pathetic attempt to claw his way back into my life. But it never came, because for the first time, Ethan had been forced to face the consequences of his own actions. And that was the real victory. Life was peaceful after that. My house? Still mine. My tenant? Still paying rent on time. And me, I was finally free. One day, Skylar and I were sitting on my porch, watching the sunset. She nudged me. Do you ever think about him? I took a sip of my wine. Not anymore. She smiled. Good. And I meant it. Because I wasn't the woman Ethan could push around anymore. I wasn't the woman who cried over him. I wasn't the woman who lost. I was the woman who rebuilt. And damn, it felt good.